Welcome to Concerned Citizens Presents. Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods is an organization dedicated to peace, economic and social justice, good government, and a clean environment. Every month, we invite an expert to enlighten us on a topic related to our mission. Because Village TV videotapes these presentations, we can share that expertise with a larger audience. We hope you enjoy today's broadcast.
Well, hello. It's good to see all of you from up here. As always, it's my pleasure to stand on this side and not be sitting and just having coffee and listening to you. And I'd like to say a few words about FER that will provide a segue into our marvelous speaker that I'm so excited to introduce. Many of you know about Bert, many of you did after he was active here. But Bert was a career at IBM when such a thing was still possible. And when he retired, he taught at the university for a while, and he had, he was ADD, which meant he was getting his PhD, but he did everything but the dissertation. And when he left teaching because he wanted to pursue something else, he went to our local community college and took courses toward a degree in environmental science because he was very concerned then about climate change. We lived in Connecticut, and he was on the greening committee for our town, and our neighboring town was building some school buildings, and he acted as an advisor to that construction. So he was very interested in energy use in buildings. Then when we moved here, the 19 was under construction, and he went to see the guy who was then head of MNC and asked if they were planning to put in a fuel cell, which was then a possible technology which they had problems with it, and you don't hear about it much. And that guy said, I don't know what a fuel cell is. And Bert said, well, how about solar? Are you putting solar on the roof? And he said, oh no. So Bert felt that there was a job here for him to educate people about energy and climate change and the relationship there. And he started talking about solar, and he formed the Energy Club. Some of you may have even been in the Energy Club once upon a time. Yes. And he would bring in speakers and to talk about developments, to talk about our concerns about it. And really, many people thought he was the devil incarnate. You know, it was a terrible thing. But there was this one person on the third board, and I feel so guilty that I don't remember her name. She was, for years, head of the Lions Club too. If you're an old timer here, maybe you'll refresh my memory. I'll be very grateful. And she said to Bert, you know, if you want to get anything done, you have to get on a board. You just can't go around having. He also did a solar fair. He brought in vendors from everywhere. He, made it like a regular fair. We had signs. People looked at us so strangely, but there was a nice turnout. Bill is here. Bill Walsh and Marilyn helped with that. Quite a few of you helped also. And Bert did get on to third. And this is the connection with Kathleen. So mixing science with politics is tricky. So right away he's on third, and what do we hear but a rumor that the reason that he wanted to get into third was that his son was head of or involved with a solar company, and he was getting on third because he was going to push that and enable his son to make it. You know how devastating that is when you are sincere, but Kathleen, I'm sure that you deal with that time and time again. And actually there was a bit of truth in that. And by the way, the person who was spreading this was the person who was the president of Third at the time. And he had checked Bert on Google and came across our son's name. And one of our sons is a partner in a venture capital firm, and they are concerned about the environment, and some of their startups, several of their startups have been concerned about climate change and so on. and they were an early investor in Sunrun. So among their many companies, Sunrun was one of them. And it turns out that this same son had invested, I don't know, about 7 or 8 years ago in this small company that was just chugging along and is going to have an IPO next month. And this probably will be one of the biggest tech IPOs that we've seen in about 10 years. And this company wants to, or is able to, speed up data processing for those big data centers by 1/3, use 1/3 less electricity and 1/3 less water. So it's encouraging to know that we may be moving in that direction. And right now, NVIDIA seems to have the lock on that, but this is coming along as a challenge to NVIDIA. So if any of you are interested in watching those things, in May, watch for an IPO. So this is that son who was looking for trouble. My other son, oh, by the way, I should say that when we got this news, when we began to hear this rumor, I sent out a letter to everybody in the Energy Club saying, yes, my son is interested in the environment, and so are all my children, and that's what everybody should be interested in. So my next son is Attorney General and Executive Vice President for a company that I checked today because I wasn't sure, is the largest solar installer in North America. So, and he is president of one of their subsidiaries, one of their solar subsidiaries. And guess who was second? His company does huge solar arrays for provinces in Canada, for states. And the second one is a residential installer, and it's Sunrun. So they're both involved in that. And let me see, my daughter, who's a fellow in the American Institute of Architects, which is not a member, a fellow is a bump up. And so she has some influence, speaks all over the country and writes articles about sustainability in buildings. And she was one of the first to get LEED. Now let's see. Buildings, she tells me, get certified, people get accredited. So she's one of the first to get LEED accreditation. And interestingly enough, the next generation is following suit. And one of my granddaughters, Kathleen, who we had hoped one time to speak to you, is getting an award at Stanford University this graduation, from which she's an alumnus, because she was a co-founder and now president of the Stanford Alumni in Climate Tech. And it has 1,000 members worldwide, including Europe, of course, but China, Asia, Africa, of people who are concerned about, graduates who are concerned about science, climate science. And she's also this president of the Climate Positive Investing Alliance, as well as the job, which what her interests are in particular are supporting projects that are concerned about the ocean. So she's more concerned in that direction. So that this good work is intergenerational. And it looks like it's not going to be a quick fix, and that we're going to be in there for the long haul. And so I wanted to introduce Kathleen, who's just marvelous and has the same kind of unbelievable energy that it takes to span both a career in research, where you just want to be in the lab and digging around, and then in politics, where you have to take on a totally different persona and be that political person. And yet here she is, she's both, and we are so lucky to have her. And we could have her every week and still keep learning. So let me tell you a little bit about Kathleen. You know how some speakers say, I'm not going to read, there's such a long list. No, I'm going to read it. Because she earned every single one of these honors. So, let's see. She is the Howard Schneiderman, a professor of the Howard Schneiderman Endowed Chair at the University of California, Irvine. She has an internationally recognized lab of students and graduate students. She was elected a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, a fellow in the American Academy of Microbiology, and a fellow in the Ecological Society of America. A fellow is special. A fellow is not a member. A fellow gets recognition from her peers. In 2022, she received the Marsh Award for Climate Change Research from the British Ecological Society, and she has published over 120 articles in scientific journals. And on top of that, she has kids. And she teaches, and she has students, and she's been a politician. She's been a council member of the Irvine City Council, which not so many years ago we didn't hear good things about.
No, that's fair.
So it's been a slog with a lot of resistance. And she was elected almost 4 years ago and is going to go up for re-election again, even though I'm sure it took some talking with the family, but there's too much work to do that's undone.
Yeah.
And she's been in the forefront of driving environmental and sustainability efforts in the city of Irvine that they never would have tackled before. So tonight it's my pleasure to introduce us, and it will be your pleasure too to have her here, and I think we're very, very fortunate. So welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you. Well, I am so happy to be here, and that was such a generous introduction from Gloria. And I really loved hearing from Gloria about Bert's work and her family's work. We're just never going to run out of work to do in the environment. And by that same token, I'm so glad that you are here. I am really impressed that you've been able to pack the room like this for environmental issues. It really speaks a lot about your community. And yeah, just really enjoying spending my time here. So I'm going to talk a bit about plastic pollution and how we're trying to deal with it, both from an engineering standpoint, because I wanted to respect Bert's interests as an engineer, so I wanted to bring that in. I'm going to talk about science, I'm going to talk about policy. I think we need to have as many pronged approaches as we can in dealing with this issue. Okay. Excellent. Okay, so I just want to tell you, as I think about communicating science to people and my students, I always try to keep this quote in mind from Greta Thunberg, who's a well-known climate activist. She's quite young. And she says, the one thing we need more than hope is action. Once we start to act, hope is everywhere. And so I try to keep that in mind because I am used to hearing bad news about the environment. I've been in this for like 30 years or so. That's all fine with me. But a lot of times when people are hearing about something for the first time, it can be overwhelming. And it's actually, there's a psychological condition about it. It's called eco-anxiety or climate anxiety. And so it can be so overwhelming that people end up getting almost paralyzed. They don't want to take action because they figure, what's the point? So one of the things that, one of the ideas about how to approach this is by focusing on action, because it is a way that we can feel empowered and feel like we can chip away at this hard news. So I'm going to be focused a lot on action in this talk. Okay, so the first thing I want to tell you is the reason I care so much about plastic pollution is because the plastic that we use and discard goes into our ecosystems, our local ecosystems like this one, and then many, many times it ends up in the ocean. Even if we're not throwing it in the ocean, it'll still get washed, the next rain that we have, all those ketchup packets that have been discarded outside the McDonald's, they get washed into the gutter and it ends up going into our creeks and then down into the ocean. You might also think, well, when I have plastic, I throw it away in the trash cans, so that's not gonna end up in the ocean. The problem is a lot of that plastic is really lightweight, so whenever they're transferring garbage from one point to another, it flies out and then it goes into our ecosystems and eventually into our ocean. And so my goal is to try to reduce as much plastic pollution in our ocean as possible. Okay, now this is what happens. So we get plastic going into our ocean, it gets picked up by these circulation currents and these gyres, and it eventually gets moved closer, like in this case for the Pacific Ocean, more closer to the center of the Pacific Ocean, and it all ends up swirling around in this big eddy and collecting there. And so if you go to this area, it's called the Great Trash Island in the Pacific Ocean, and they call it plastic soup. So it's just this big, it's something like the size of Manhattan, and it looks just like this, and it's very difficult to deal with. You don't need to go like out to the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I'm told by people who are kayaking out right off the coast here a lot that they're just shocked when they look for plastic, and they've got plastic every time that they're rowing. They hit something plastic. There's a lot of plastic out there. So yeah, this is not ideal. What to do about it? Well, you might think, well, why aren't people just recycling it? Why does it end up in the trash? Well, it's not recycled. This is in the US, only 6% of our plastic is recycled. Now, if you go more globally and you include like Europe, the numbers go up a little bit. They go up maybe to about 12%. All right, so what's going on here? Why isn't our plastic recycled? Most of it is not recyclable. So you'll see on the little recycle symbol on maybe your water bottles or whatever, it's technically recyclable, but in reality, there's very few facilities that actually can recycle it. And so it ends up, you'll throw it in your recycling bin, and the recycling truck comes pick it up, it'll end up going in the trash. And so that's for 94% of our plastic. And there's also some plastics that you can't recycle. So like black plastic, can't recycle it. It's just so recycling actually is not a great, it's not a great solution to this. You can try burning it, and some countries burn it, but then that creates pollution, right? And so really, it's a problem. All right. Now, why? Why do we end up like this? Why does everybody, including me, I used to think, I thought I was so good recycling all these plastic water bottles. What happened? Well, the recycling's a lie. It was made up by the plastic companies, which are also the oil companies. And many decades ago, they wanted to start using, like Coca-Cola wanted to start using plastic water bottles, and they didn't want to have to deal with the waste, and they didn't want the bad PR, and so they created the idea of recycling. It was from these companies who wanted to put the onus of responsibility on us, on the consumers, to fix the problem that they were creating. And it's worked so well that genuinely, even though I was in the environment field up until like 10 years ago, I didn't realize that the plastic wasn't being recycled. I wish I could go back in time and start using a lot less plastic then. Okay, now, so it's going out into the ocean, it's going to this plastic island. Okay, why isn't eventually that breaking down? Like most other things. Like you have paper trash. That breaks down eventually, so why is that still there? Well, plastic actually doesn't get broken down by microbes, most microbes at this point. It's a new compound, basically, that has not really been seen before in nature. And so eventually it'll start fragmenting. So especially if the sun's hitting it. So these are toothbrushes that have been picked up from the ocean. These toothbrushes, I don't even know how old they are, but they could be 10 or more years old. That plastic doesn't go away. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller and smaller particles. And this is one of the reasons why the plastic is so hard to deal with. Okay. Oh, and I do want to point out, every toothbrush you've ever owned, that I've ever owned, still exists. If you think about that, that's just toothbrushes. Okay, so it starts breaking down more into these smaller and smaller pieces, and eventually you get to microplastics. So microplastics, have any of you heard of microplastics, just to get, okay, yeah, a lot of you. All right, I'm glad this is becoming more of the public awareness, but microplastics, basically, they have a specific definition. It's pieces of plastic smaller than 5 millimeters diameter. And so if you think about a pencil eraser, anything smaller than that is a microplastic. And this is a real problem. So first of all, like I thought, well, this big plastic trash island, why not just send a bunch of cargo ships out there with some nets and scoop up the trash and then you're good? Well, the answer is actually the bulk of the plastic in those islands is microplastics, and you can pick up the bigger pieces from nets, but you're missing a lot of it. It also passes through a lot of filtration systems in water treatment plants too. So now we have a lot of microplastics in our drinking water. It's easily ingested by animals because it's so small. If it's really small, it can pass through our digestive systems and into our blood. So it can have medical effects then. Okay, and then in addition, the microplastics, as you move up the food chain, the plastics get more and more concentrated because again, so you have like these, I don't know. Hang on. Can you go back, please? Anybody? Would you mind please going back? I accidentally hit the forward. Okay, thank you. So you have, these are like little nematodes, and so they'll pick up some microplastics from the water or whatever. And then you have a snail that's eating the nematode, and then those plastics, because the nematodes haven't broken it down, they're still in the nematodes, they end up in the snail. And then you get the fish eating a snail, and it gets concentrated more and more until you get to us, and then it gets quite concentrated in us. And I'll tell you 100%, everybody in this room has plastic in them. Really, no matter what your diet is, your drinking water, you're getting it. Okay, so this is a concern as well. And then you go to newborns. Newborns actually has the highest concentrations of microplastics in them. If you do surveys, so people will do surveys of baby poop and placentas. And the studies have been done in different parts of the world. Almost every sample, almost every newborn tested has had microplastics in it. And so now it's amazing to think about. We are giving birth to organisms that are part human, part plastic. Right? So it's pretty daunting. Okay, and then this can be harmful to animal health. So if you go and you do studies on rats and other animals, there's a number of different things that can happen. These are just a few of them. So physically, yeah, the plastic can block your organs. This happens a lot to, if you look at marine mammals. So have any of you been to the Marine Mammal Rescue Center? Yeah, it's really neat. It's in Laguna Beach. And so they'll pick up sea lions and all sorts of animals. And if they're sickly, they'll take them in there and they'll take care of them. Well, they say every sea lion they pick up has straws in their lungs. And they've gotten to the point where they just don't take them out anymore because they know as soon as they release them back again, they'll get more. I guess the straws float on the surface of the water. And then when the sea lions come up to get a little bit of air, it goes right up their noses. So that's blockage of organs, physical damage, you get the plastic in, it's moving around is a problem. Some of the plastics mimic hormones, and so it'll start disrupting hormones. There's reproductive effects then. Behaviorally, it will change for some reason. It'll change how animals choose what to eat. So then they end up eating things that are less nutritious. And it also impairs their navigation for some of them. So these are just a few things. So it's really affecting us, well, especially our oceans, but a lot of other animals too. And I know that this is sad news, and I hate thinking about it. And I will just say, anytime I'm around outside and I see a piece of plastic on the ground, I will pick it up because I have done ocean cleanups. I've seen all that ending up in the bay. Every straw that I see on the ground, I picture that in a sea lion, so I pick it up. So there's a lot that we can do, but I'm going to be telling, most of the rest of this talk is going to be about what we can do about it. So there definitely is hope. All right. Okay, so here's one of the things that I think is really cool. Okay, so you've got the plastic that's going into our water, and then that's going out into the ocean. Well, one of the main thoroughfares for water in Orange County, where I am in Irvine City, is the San Diego Creek. And so here's a picture of the San Diego Creek right here. All right. And recently, the Newport Bay Conservation Group, they got money from the state, I think from Cotty Petrie Norris, to buy this trash interceptor. It's right here. So, okay, so as the water is coming down, before it hits the back bay, it has to go through this little contraption here. And there's a little net here, and it directs the bigger plastic trash into here. There's a little, this is a water wheel actually, like a sawmill has, it moves around with water, and it picks up the trash, and then it deposits in here somehow. I'm not an engineer, all right? So this is the engineering part of the solution. And so this is one example. I'm also on the Newport Bay Watershed Board, and they have like smaller versions of this. Most of their storm drains that go into the ocean, they'll have netted, they'll have rope nets that will capture the plastic, and then they'll empty that every so often. So we are trying to intercept it before it gets in there. Okay, and then, okay, so now let's say it still passes that, or you're dealing with microplastics. So with microplastics, as people are using water and they create wastewater, remember there's microplastics all in the water that we have right now. If that goes into our treatment plants, it's a real challenging situation right now to deal with that. Because again, those microplastics can be too small they'll pass through the filtration systems. But we have a local conservation science group. It's called the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project. And they got money to do a study to check for biological ways to treat microplastics in wastewater. And they end up studying something called biofiltration. In biofiltration, they found, just the bottom line, it's a way to naturally remove microplastics from water, and it'll actually remove an average of 72% of microplastics from water as it's being treated. And so I'll tell you about it. So here you have, this is actually so simple and elegant and not too expensive. But basically, you have an area, so let's say you have a storm drain here. And what you do is, right where the water is going to come out of the storm drain, you dig a big trench. And then you fill it right here with some gravel at the very bottom, some clay material here a little bit farther up, and then you plant plants in it, all right? And then here's a little dam that, so as the water is coming down, it's here for a little while. The water, as it's sitting here, will get soaked into this soil here. And the microbes in the soil, so there's microbes all over the soil. The microbes, as they're growing, they're forming little colonies, and they've got connections tall to each other. And as they're growing, they will accidentally stick to these microplastics. The microplastics will basically get glued to the microbes, and the microbes are glued to the soil naturally. And so that's a way to trap those microplastics in this area here. And so then you end up with the microplastics being trapped right here in this soil, and then as the water seeps further down, then it's purified. And as it starts going farther down into our streams, you've removed a lot of the plastics. And so here's how it looks in real life. This is one of the systems that Squirt was studying, and so you see this storm drain here, and here's the biofiltration. You would never know, right? It's not a plant. We didn't have to put all the money into building a plant. We just had to dig some ditches and put some gravel and special soil there and plant plants, and that helps us. Now, there's a caveat there in that it's not like that plastic goes away, it's just trapped there. It's trapped here now in the microbes. Eventually, we're gonna have to deal with that, and so that's the next thing. Okay, so how do we deal with that? So right now, the reason that it's hard to get rid of these plastics is because there's not really many microbes that can decompose them. But there are people all over the world very, very, very interested in finding microbes that can decompose plastic. And I happen to study fungi for my work. I'm a client scientist, but I study fungi because fungi can, in many ways, help us fight climate change naturally. And this is one of the ways that we can do this. This is not my work. This is the work of Anthony Amend. He's a professor at University of Hawaii, but he was trained at UCI. And so in Hawaii, of course, they care a lot about plastic trash. And so what he's doing is he's collecting water samples all over from the ocean, all over around Hawaii, and trying to cultivate fungi that are growing in that water. Now, why fungi? Well, fungi are very, very good at decomposing material that nothing else can decompose. So bacteria can decompose stuff, they're lightweights. Fungi can decompose the really tough stuff. So just to give you an example, Chernobyl, the reactor that melted down, right? And so they used graphite. So they used graphite to cool down those reactor cores. And when Chernobyl exploded, all this graphite went all over. That's carbon, right? So graphite is carbon, and it's actually pretty tough for most microbes to break down. Well, they left the graphite alone for quite some time. Eventually, some scientists came back and collected some of it, took it to the lab. They found out there's fungi growing in that graphite, incredibly radioactive graphite. Very tough to break down normally. There are fungi there, handling it no problem, right? They can decompose concrete. So if anybody could decompose plastic, it's these fungi. So he's going around, he's collecting all these fungi that he can find, and then testing to see whether particular species can decompose plastic. And so here are 3 different species of fungi that he found. Now these petri dishes, so these are petri dishes, see all the cloudy, here, I'll just show you. See the cloudy, like the milky sort of colored area here? That's plastics that he's introduced into the agar in the growing medium for these petri dishes. And then here's the fungi. And wherever you see a little halo that's clear, that's the fungus breaking down the plastic. See? So this one's really good at it, breaking down a lot of plastic, a lot. All right, and so this is really, really promising. Now that he knows that these fungi can break down the plastics, we can go in, we can sequence all of their DNA, we can find which genes they're using to break down the plastic, and then we can cultivate that to use in our treatment plants and other places. Right? A lot of our treatment plants, they already use microbes to break down pollutants, but now they can add these plastic-eating fungi. So, and this is just his lab. There are many, many labs all over the world who are working on this. And so I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that we're able to find some that can be mass-produced like this. It'd be one of those Hail Mary sort of situations. Okay. All right, so that's dealing with the plastic that has been made. Now, I mentioned that, the plastic industry is the oil industry. If you may have noticed that there's a lot more plastic things being made than used to. So we have, this podium's plastic. And if you had a podium that you bought 30 years ago, that would have been wood. That is because the oil industry, they see the writing on the wall. They know that it's only a matter of time before people move off of gas-powered vehicles and so forth. They're using solar. They need something to use their oil in, and that's to make plastic everything they possibly can. And so that is called plasticization. And so there's a lot more plastic being produced now every year. And so here's the idea. Okay, so you have a problem. You have a lot of plastic that's being made. And you can think of a metaphor like a bathtub that's overrunning. So this is all the plastic that's being made, and it's increasing every year. So how do you deal with that? You could get a mop and some buckets and try to mop up the water as it's coming out. But you will never catch up with it because there's more and more being made every time. Or you could just turn off the tap, right? You stop making the plastic. And ultimately, I think that is the best solution, because then we're not playing catch up all the time. And let's see. This group, Oceana, they're a nonprofit. They obviously care about preserving oceans. And they have this approach. So they do have cleanups, they have all that, but the most of their efforts is going into simply ending single-use plastics. They just want people to stop making them. Now, some things like this, it's plastic, it's not the end of the world. They make it, it'll be here for maybe a few decades. It's not bad. The single-use plastics, they're the problem. So that's the straws, the candy wrappers, the water bottles. That's single use. So whenever you have something that you'd only use once and then throw away, those are the ones that are really hard to recycle and that we're making so much of. So the question is, how do we end single-use plastics? Okay, so I'm going to tell you about what we have been doing in Irvine, what I've been trying to do. And so I want to say, Gloria mentioned that I'm a UCI professor, so study climate change assisted fungi, and I'm also a council member. And that is that's not an obvious path for scientists, I'll just say, right? So I got into science because I'd rather spend my day looking through a microscope than talking to people. I'm shy. I don't like attention. I don't like my photograph being taken. I don't like bragging about myself or anything like that, and I don't like BS. I'm not really your poster politician. So why did I end up doing this? Well, back in 2017 in April, that was Trump's first administration. And in April, the very first year he was in office, he said, on this date in April, I'm going to have a press conference and I'm going to tell everybody whether I'm pulling the country out of the Paris Climate Agreement. All right, now, that date that you mentioned, the time, I happened to have a large lecture class I was teaching on climate change. And so I said, okay, we'll watch this press conference and we'll see what he's going to say. So the thing is that if you're in front of a large lecture, you see everybody's faces. You can tell who's bored and sleeping or on their phone or whatever. And so we're watching him come out, and he comes out and he says, I'm pulling us out of the Paris Climate Agreement. And as he's saying this, I'm looking at all my students, about 100 students, and I'm looking at their faces. And they had the reaction that you might imagine. They were horrified, demoralized, frightened. I mean, these are the young people who have to deal with this. And as I'm watching them, I just was brokenhearted. I thought, I have been so naive. I thought that if I studied climate change for my career, I would find this information out that was very important. I would put it in my journal, publish it in journals, and then somehow miraculously, elected officials would find it and then know what to do about it and fix it. Right? And it was very clear that day that that was not going to happen. I mean, I especially couldn't expect it at the federal level. So I decided at that point, all right, I need to get out of the classroom and out of my lab and start talking to people in my community and seeing if I can get the local elected officials to help me out here. Because obviously, the federal government's not. So I looked up, I Googled, I found out about Citizens Climate Lobby, OC for Climate Action, all these different grassroots groups have been, and groups like this that have been addressing the environment for decades. I had no idea about, all right? I was Trinity Shelter's Ivory Tower. So I went out there, I went to their meetings, I started asking around, what is it that we can do? I found out that one of the ways that we can fight climate change locally is to urge our councils to adopt 100% renewable energy in their cities. And so we formed a large group. We had, oh my gosh, all these different, we had like 40 different businesses, nonprofits, clubs. We had Girl Scout packs. We had UCI clubs. We had the hospitals. We all worked together and we went to every single city council in Orange County and asked them to do this. And Irvine agreed to do it, and so did 4 other cities. And so we started this agency called OC Power Authority, and it is to this day now delivering renewable energy for these cities, has made a huge dent in our greenhouse gas production in the county, and is now the 2nd largest agency in the country delivering renewable energies. So, thank you. And it was like, once a city decides to do that, they can flip a switch one day and then the whole city goes on to renewable energy. So right away, just a few people can make a big difference. And first of all, I found I really enjoyed this. And second, I realized how tough it was to talk to, there are some elected officials, they don't really want to know the truth because it's inconvenient for them, right? Or they might not believe in science or whatever. And so it was a struggle. And I thought, well, if I just run for office, then I can get into office. And then I'll just do the environmental policy myself. And then it'll cut the middleman. And so I did. I ran for office back in 2022. And a lot of environmentalists helped me. And I got elected. And I've been in office since then. And one of my top priorities is environmental policy. So for quite a while, it was like every meeting I wanted to bring in another environmental policy. Well, pretty early on, I decided let's see what we can do to reduce single-use plastics in Irvine. This is a critical issue. A lot of our students are asking us to do something about it. Okay, so we're going to do it. So what we did was I asked my staff to put together a proposal to give to the rest of the council. How can we ban single-use plastics? Now, we can't ban all single-use plastics. It's very hard, but at least in the food service industry, right? So all this takeout food, you don't need a lot of that plastic in takeout foods, right? So my team put together this proposal, and it was pretty ambitious. Anyway, so we agendized it, and it went on our city's website one day, and we were gonna discuss it like a week later. I don't know how, but somehow the plastic industry found out about it. And particularly the American Beverage Company, which provides plastic bottles to Coca-Cola and also plastic items to McDonald's. They found out about it. They sent lobbyists down to Irvine. They flew them down. In the meanwhile, I was pretty new on the council, and I was like, that's just a small city council. Anyway, so they just came in guns blazing. They, first of all, they started faking emails that they would send to all the council members as if they're coming from constituents saying, we can't believe this. The reason that I know it's fake, because they would sign the name of the person and give their phone number, and we would call them. And we'd say, so we just want to talk to you about this. What are your concerns? Like, what are you talking about? I haven't sent any emails. I don't know. And so they were faking that. They started sending out texts, spam texts, to everybody in Irvine saying, hey, Councilmember Treseder wants to ban bottled water. Not plastic water bottles, but just all bottled water. Forget it. Like, not even in cans, not even in glass bottles. So they had that. They went door to door. They hired people to go door to door and knocking on as many people's doors as they could in the city saying, Councilmember Treseder wants to ban bottled water. If there's an earthquake, you will have no drinking water because of her. I had a nonprofit that I was supporting for another reason, for campus safety, and they got to that person and they had the person in charge of that nonprofit write a op-ed in the paper specifically calling me out because they knew that I was supportive of this group. So anyway, it was amazing. So then they came in, we had like 100 people come to the council, all asking us to ban plastic. And then we had a few lobbyists come in saying, no, don't do this. And you can probably guess what happened, right? So the rest of the council found that they were not very motivated to do anything about it. And so that's why you have this headline here, Irvine shoots down plastics ban for now, keep studying issue. And so during this meeting, so you have a number of people who ran on being environmentalists and still wanted to run in the future on being environmentalists, and they didn't want to vote no on it. So instead what they said was, let's do a survey. Okay, let's do a survey of all the businesses in Irvine and find out what they think about this. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're just trying to kill it. They also said, maybe we'll ban plastic straws or something like that. Okay, so they said, okay, we'll do the survey. And I'm sure that they thought that obviously the businesses are not going to want to do this. And so we spent the next 3 years in the city doing this survey, and it took forever to come back because the staff were afraid to bring it back. And in the end, okay, so this group, we hired this group to do this survey. They sent out the survey to every business owner in Irvine. They got responses from 30% of the businesses in Irvine, which is a very high survey rate response. And look at what they said. 78% of the businesses said, yeah, we agree, we should ban styrofoam. 67% said, yes, let's ban plastic straws. And even 61% said, yeah, we're interested in stopping using all single-use plastic in our restaurant as long as you can help us with the transition. You know, can you help us buy the dishwashers or show us where we can get alternative materials? And so they were even up for it then. And I mean, I have to say I was shocked. I'm sure that the council did not expect this. But we also asked, well, why? Why do you favor this? And would anybody like to guess what their number one reason was? Their expenses and costs. That was number 2. Number 1 was the environment. Yeah, they care about the environment. Yeah, these business owners, they have hearts, you know, they're people, they live in the community, and they wanted to help the environment. They also saw the math and saw that it would likely be cheap in the long run, maybe not right away, but in the long run. And then the third one was that they anticipated that their customers would want it. So, yeah. So anyway, I was shocked. And so, so one of the things that we had done in the meanwhile is, yeah, these businesses said that they would like to do this if they had a bit more support, and that included knowing, well, which products can they use that are actually good? Because you go to the grocery store and you see lots of plastic utensils that say they're compostable, but they're not really. So they want to know what there is. So we put together a guide, and you can find it on our webpage, and it has exactly, like, these are the catalog numbers of these utensils that are good. And here's how much they cost, here's how much the alternative costs, see how much money you save. And so that's out there right now, and we also pointing out here that state law actually now forbids food companies from just giving out plastic unless they're asked, right? So ideally, you have to ask them to get a plastic straw, or you have to ask them to get a plastic fork. That's the state law right now. Nobody follows it. So what we're doing in my office is we're finding out who's giving out those plastics for free, and we're sending them letters. That's not a threatening letter, it's a friendly letter saying, like, this is the state law. So, yeah. And that's included here. So, okay. All right, so I just want to wrap up here and just want to come back to, look, there's a lot of hope, all right? So we're in a bad situation. A lot of it is because of greed and industry and all that, and a lot of it is because there are politicians who are easily persuaded not to do anything. But there are a lot of people who do care, and that includes these businesses, right? And I was listening to Anne talk in her comments earlier, and she was talking about how, look, you know, we're just, you know, 100 people or so, but there are 100 people or so in every city. And when you add it up globally, it adds up. And I was thinking about a story that I had heard, and it was, you know, there's these 2 people walking down a beach. And they're walking down a beach, and they come around the point, and they see there's all these sea stars that have been washed up onto the beach. Tens of thousands of sea stars, and they're dying. And so, you know, one person says, oh, this is terrible. All these sea stars are dying. And then the other person goes and grabs one of the sea stars and throws it back in the ocean. And the first person says, why did you do that? You can't save the world yourself. You know, there's no way we can throw all these sea stars back in. And the other person says, look, I can't save the world, but I can save the world for that sea star. Right? I can save the world for that sea star. And so I agree that, you know, if we work here, you know, at least we can influence our world here. And then we can count on people elsewhere who care about the same things and also want to help. And I just want to leave us with that message of hope.
An excellent talk. Thank you very much. Your opening example was the toothbrushes. And for people who shave, not me, when you discard the razor blade, you keep the handle. So why can't, with toothbrushes, have the brush head design and then the handle made out of metal so you wouldn't have to waste 90% of it?
Yeah, so clearly there should be options. And for instance, there's a shop that I shop at down in Costa Mesa. It's one of the only low waste shops that is around. So I go there and I buy my toothbrushes there. And you get bamboo toothbrushes, and then the bristles are horsehair or something like that. But then my dentist said I needed to have the electric toothbrushes. I guess I wasn't brushing well enough. But anyway, so I'm like, oh no, I can't do that. So I did buy the electric toothbrush, which is plastic, but then it lasts for years. And then I found out you can even buy the bamboo heads. You can buy the bamboo heads that will fit on those electric toothbrushes. So you're exactly right. You can absolutely find ways around that. When you think about it, back, in the 50s, there wasn't any plastic and everybody survived, Most people survived. Sorry.
When I went to Norway and Denmark, you don't get plastic, and it's wooden fast food utensils.
I know.
They're small and they're very sturdy. I don't know why we can't incorporate that into the United States, because that would lose our wood.
I agree. Yeah, it would be decomposable, and it is cheaper. And I was up in British Columbia in Canada last summer, and I ordered a coffee, and they gave it to me. And I'm used to having, the coffee cup will be cardboard, but I'm used to having the plastic top be there. And it was cardboard. They had a cardboard plastic top. And I said, thanks so much for not using plastic. And they said, oh no, it's banned in the whole state of British Columbia. Everybody does this. And so it is entirely possible. I think really one of the main reasons that we have so much plastic is because the plastic and oil industry are scary for a lot of politicians. Yeah.
So again, me too, great talk.
Thank you.
I've noticed in the last couple of weeks there's been an awful lot of coverage on public radio and PBS, NPR, which I listen to much too much of, but it's kind of on in the background. I've noticed coverage of a couple of key issues. Bottom line issue, throughout politics, is money.
Yeah.
And, the oil companies, knowing that the oil, the fossil fuels are being phased out, are in the plastic biz.
Yeah.
And the use of plastic seems to save money as opposed to dishwashing, washing glasses, utensils, etc.
Yeah.
And the issue, I think the economic thing is called externalities, where
Right.
they pass on their cleanup costs to society.
Right.
So a policy solution, you might want to comment on that, is building in the cleanup costs to plastic products. And the other thing they emphasized was biodegradable substitutes. How's that coming? Last thing, microplastics, they can't do a controlled study that really measures, how much is harmful. So those are issues that have just popped up in the last 2 weeks, been widely covered.
Yeah, so I agree. So in terms of the economy, yeah, it can be a bit deceptive, because if you're just starting up a business, you're a small business owner, it's cheaper to get the big box of plastic utensils to start off with rather than buying a dishwasher. And so in our city, we're looking into, can we provide incentives? So we get incentives from the state or other grants that can help folks buy these kind of larger expenses that is required for low cost. So there's that, and so I don't want to discount that. That is an issue. The externalities, yes. So the idea is that, yeah, Coca-Cola, they get to sell their plastic bottles, and then they leave it up to us to deal with it, and they leave it up to our waste management companies to try to deal with it, and they leave it up to our county elected officials to dig out new landfills to put it in there. They don't have to deal with it. So that's an externality, and so absolutely we should internalize the externalities and make those companies actually pay for all that cleanup. They're very good at avoiding it if you look at all the derelict oil platforms out in the ocean. So that's hard, because we do need the political will to do that. But we get our political will from you all. And so like I've been telling folks, I get maybe 50 or so emails a day from constituents asking me to do things, and I read them. I do. I read them, and they do influence my position on things. If I know that there's something that the public really wants, I will work extra hard for that. If I don't hear from the public about something, then it's very hard for me to go up there and pound the pulpit and convince my fellow colleagues to vote with me, because they're not hearing that. Yeah. So, and then what was the third thing? I forget what the third thing was.
Biodegradable?
Oh yeah, biodegradable. Yeah, we're always working on biodegradable materials, and that's more the engineering side. So so far we haven't had very good materials quite yet, but hopefully soon. Right, let's see. Oh yeah, okay, sorry.
Thank you very much for an excellent talk. Almost exactly 12 years ago to this day, I gave a talk on plastics to concerned citizens based on the book Plastic Ocean. And I was very concerned because of the 5 oceanic gyres, which are each about the size of Texas.
Yeah.
And since that gets into the food chain, and it's everywhere on the planet, so there's nowhere where they don't exist.
Right.
Is there any hope of clearing, doing anything to help clean up the ocean?
For those, yeah, so there are different companies and nonprofits who are working on developing engineering where they could just, in theory, for instance, sail a ship through that gyre, and that would pick up the bigger pieces of plastic, and then they would, I actually saw a group talk about this, then they have a little manufacturing setup inside the boat, and then they'll churn out like oars and surfboards and things like that, or materials for building, so that if they're in a country that's not very well off, that then they can give them building supplies that are plastic. And so I think that is great. That's a possibility. And then yeah, that's a tough one. Once it gets into the ocean and it's all fragmented like that, like you might hope that those fungi could be helpful. I do worry a little bit about trying to tweak the microbial community in a large scale like that, because sometimes that goes badly for us. But yeah, I think for that, the main thing that we need to do is just stop the production of plastic. Once it gets in the ocean, it's broken down into microparticles. It's very hard.